Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the last LSU Sports Insider of 2024. I'm Zach Ewing, along with Advocate LSU beat writer Reed Darcy. We are here for the postgame show, recapping the Texas Bowl. LSU beats Baylor 44-31 in this one, Reed, and it sounds like a wild game. Honestly, LSU had the lead the whole time. I mean, I think they controlled things. It turned into a bit of a shootout, but it never felt like LSU was in danger of losing this one.
Yeah, it was a bit of a roller coaster. I think at one point it felt like LSU might have been close to letting it slip away, but they made enough plays to make sure that didn't happen. I think at times you saw how LSU's offense was probably as explosive as we've seen it all season. But there were other times where we saw the miscues, the mistakes, the turnovers that kind of held them back all season. So, it's tough to, I guess, find some real takeaways from this one just because it was so wild and there were so many roller coaster plays. But yeah, like you said, LSU led all the way through and they did enough to win. And so I guess that's a positive going forward because they were missing some key guys. Their roster was less intact than Baylor was. And they still scored 44 points and did a pretty decent job against Baylor's offense. So overall, I guess an encouraging game when you slice it all up and then break it down.
Yeah, 100%. And want to encourage you all to leave your comments and questions live. As Mike just did, we'll show them live on the show as long as you keep them clean. Nuss wins Heisman next year. He's feeling good about things. Hey, it's a time for optimism. Also want to let you know that the postgame show is brought to you, as all of our podcasts are, all football season long, by Waste Pro. Tiger fans, if you're planning a tailgate or event, keep your guests comfortable with portable toilets from Waste Pro. Call 225-744-6400 and mention the LSU Sports Insider for a special offer. That said, we're also going to bring in another of our Advocate beat writers, Koki Riley. Welcome to the show. He's here as well. We have our Wilson Alexander and Scott Rabelais in Houston covering the game. The three of us watched it on TV, as most of you probably did, but still plenty of takeaways. Koki, look, we talked about this on the preview show yesterday with Wilson and Rab and how kind of bowl games are one of those, I don't really care about that game. And, that game's tomorrow. And then for 3 hours, you're like really locked into the result as a fan. And when you win them, you like to look at them as a positive going into next year.
Yeah. I think you can look at that game as a positive, at least from the younger players' perspective, right? Like a guy like Trey'Dez Green getting 6 catches for 53 yards, a guy like Devon Keys getting the only defensive touchdown this season for LSU, which is kind of incredible given how many turnovers this team has forced this season. So I guess there are definitely positives in terms of that are like meaningful things heading into next year. But there's also a lot of ugly stuff happening in this game. So there's just a lot to parse out. And I haven't totally wrapped my head around all of it, to be totally honest with you. But at the same time, like, I don't know. It was just a very entertaining game. A lot of stuff happened. I think Wilson tweeted out the Bill Hader meme, the Stephon Bill Hader meme from Saturday Night Live. Like, I think it was like some point during the fourth quarter. It's kind of like the perfect way to encapsulate how this game literally had everything.
Yeah, just a bit. And that included one negative Kurt mentions here. Weeks carted off near the end of the first half with an injury. He says, what was the injury? I don't think we got an official report. Correct me, guys, if I'm wrong, but his ankle was pointing the wrong way. So I'm going to go with broken ankle and probably some ligament damage too. So not a good night for Whit Weeks. But I will say, and the ESPN announcing crew was all over it. Like, it showed what a beloved teammate that guy is. Everybody on the roster came up to dap him up, and he's like smiling and laughing as he's being carted off the field with an ankle pointing the wrong way. So kind of a scary moment, but I think there's a lot of positives, Koki. Like, I think you're right. There was some mess there, but you mentioned the freshman. Like, LSU did not have its top receiver in this game. Chris Hilton kind of played. He looked like a top receiver. 4 catches, 113 yards. They did not have their top tight end in this game. Trey'Dez Green looked like a top tight end. They did not have 3/5 of their offensive line. The offensive line was fine. They didn't have some key defenders. I thought some young defenders played really well. So, Reed, if again, bowl games, you got to take them with a grain of salt. You're not playing with the same team. You're not playing against the same team that Baylor was during the year. But I think all in all, it's a night where LSU showed it has some depth, showed it has some youth. And when you look at what they've done in the transfer portal, I don't think you have to squint too hard to be optimistic about this team in 2025.
Yeah, 6.9 yards per play, 4.2 yards per carry, 0 sacks allowed, which is particularly impressive because, like you mentioned, LSU is missing 3 starters on the offensive line. The young guys did a good job pass protecting, and Nussmeier did a good job getting the ball out on time. LSU had 8 passes of at least 15 yards. That's that explosive offense that we hadn't seen much of last year. We saw a glimpse of against Oklahoma, especially when Chris Hilton had his 2 long touchdowns. Last 2 games, Chris Hilton had 4 catches of at least 40 yards, if I'm getting that correct off the top of my head. 3 of them were touchdowns. So, that speed element, it's something that LSU didn't have all year when he was hurt. Now it does. We'll see how much he's involved next season. Also had 2 rushes of 10-plus yards. Nussmeier was 24 of 34 for 304 yards, 3 touchdowns and a pick. And the defense prevented Oklahoma from converting 3rd and 4th down 15 out of 19 times. Baylor was 4 of 19 on 3rd and 4th downs. So that's a great sign as well. The defense played its best on 3rd and 4th down. So yeah, a lot of positives to take from it. Koki mentioned the negatives. You had a missed field goal, a botched extra point. The snap was bad. You allowed a block on the field goal. Garrett Nussmeier threw a really untimely interception. He just didn't see the linebacker dropping back into coverage. We saw that a lot this season. And Aaron Anderson had a really untimely fumble. Baylor wasn't able to take advantage of those mistakes, but if they had, it might have been a completely different game. So if you look at those 2 plays, you could have seen LSU maybe let things slip away a little bit, but they didn't, and they held on, and then they won. And it's a pretty dominant, commanding victory outside of those miscues.
Reed, I'm a very positive and sunny guy. I always look at the bright side of situations. But I think the thing that I kind of underrated heading into this game, and maybe Reed and Wilson would admit the same thing because we both picked Baylor. All 3 of us picked Baylor to win the football game. Is that there was a very stark talent advantage between LSU when LSU's offense faced Baylor's defense. And you could see it every single time Chris Hilton just sprinted by whatever poor Baylor defensive back had to try to catch up with him. And that, and Trey Green's size and physicality, like these were things that LSU had stark advantages with, despite the fact they were playing without 3 starters in the offensive line, despite the fact that there was no Mason Taylor, there was no Kyron Lacey. As long as you had Garrett Nussmeier in there who could get those playmakers the ball, they were fine. And I thought the offensive line wasn't fantastic in this game. They had there was definitely moments where Nussmeier was pressured pretty quickly, but they were more than good enough, I thought, to be able to get the ball to their playmakers. And that's kind of all that mattered really in this game, because they ran the ball well enough to the point where they weren't in too many 3rd and long situations. And it was just a pretty dominant offensive performance. I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that, LSU, those, top 10 recruiting classes kind of paying off where you have those talented players on those depth spots. So when you're put into a situation like this, even against a Baylor team that's basically playing everybody that they had during the regular season, you can still go out there and score a ton of points. So I think that was promising. But I think what was probably less promising was the defensive performance, especially against the passing attack of Baylor. I know Baylor is a very good offense. They were bringing back pretty much everybody they had during the regular season. But at the same time, it was kind of disappointing to see some of the poor tackling, to see some of the busts in coverage and stuff like that. And I just wanted to point that out outside of just the special team stuff, which Reed mentioned, because obviously that was a major issue, but that almost goes without saying.
Yeah, like there was a couple of key pivot points where Baylor certainly could have gotten back into this game. And the quarterback threw for 445 yards. I'm just saying, I didn't realize it was quite that high. I knew it was well over 300. He threw for 445 yards. But there was one, specific point where it's 34-24 and Baylor has the ball and they had a 4th down and chose to go for it instead of kicking the field goal to cut it to 7 points. Or am I thinking about this wrong? Were they still down 17 at that point? It's all melting together, guys. It's getting
I
a
think
lead
they
on
were
New Year's
down
Eve.
10, and that was right before the snaps over the quarterback's head for 30 some odd yard loss.
That was so that was the second one I was going to mention.
Yeah.
The first one is right after the interception, or right after the fumble, excuse me, and Baylor goes down and scores. They had a fourth down, and it was called a touchdown on the field. And I wasn't so sure that it was a touchdown, but I was very surprised the call was overturned because it was really close to me. And I thought LSU caught a break there that it looked like the receiver's toe was in, and you could sit there, and they were trying to argue, on the broadcast, like, hey, the rest of his foot came down out of bounds. It looked like his foot tapped, came back up, and then came back down. And in any case, I'm thinking this has got to be one that just stays as called because you can't really, it's 50-50, right? So you just keep it as called. So I thought LSU kind of caught a break there. You mentioned the 4th and 1 on Baylor's next drive where the snap goes over Sawyer Robertson's head. I mean, you kind of turn a couple of those plays around, and Baylor is probably driving to tie or win the game at the end instead of just trying to get within 10 points at the end or within a touchdown at the end. So it was a crazy game. It could have gone differently, but in the end, as Mary Beth says, a great way for LSU to end the season. And people are not going to remember all of those details by the time next August rolls around. The next time LSU plays, August 30th at Clemson. And I think people are going to remember that they've won 3 straight bowl games. Brian Kelly is 3-0 in bowl games. They did win 9 games, and they have a little bit of momentum for whatever that's worth going into the rest of the offseason.
Yeah, and the interesting part about this game is that they probably should have been up by more. I mean, there was an opportunity to score another touchdown up 28-7 before halftime, and that would have really, really put the game out of reach. And then Anderson drops 2 balls in the end zone. The field goal gets blocked, and all of a sudden Baylor turns around and turns that into a touchdown, I believe, right? I think there were opportunities for this game for LSU to win by 35, and there was also opportunities for Baylor to have the ball with a chance to tie the game at the very end. So I think winning by 20 was like roughly the mean score of what this game actually was, given how many crazy things happened on both sides of the ball. But to actually answer your question, I think that this was a promising game from the standpoint of you have talent, young talent that can step into roles and make contributions next season. Whether that be on the defensive line with McKinley and Bro playing in this game and doing a more than respectable job, whether it's Gabriel Relaford at edge, he's going to earn at least some snaps, even though they added 3 edge rushers out of the transfer portal this offseason. Devon Keys at linebacker, Treyas Green at tight end, obviously. So Caden Durham is almost certainly going to be this team's lead running back next year. So I think I think all that stuff is probably the most positive stuff that you can take away from this game. I can't really say the same for the secondary if I'm being perfectly honest, but that's a really good Baylor offense. To be fair, they can really throw the ball. And Sawyer Robinson's a talented quarterback, as we sort of saw today. But I think all in all, it was a positive day for LSU, and especially for LSU's younger players when it comes to turning this into wins next season.
Yeah, look, we don't want to nitpick too much. Yes, Sawyer Robinson threw for 445 yards, but he needed 51 attempts to do it. So it's not like it was just explosive after explosive after explosive. LSU obviously had the turnover for a touchdown, which is a huge play. And then I'm remiss for not mentioning Xavier Thomas. I thought that was a huge play in this game too. It looked like Baylor was kind of finding its feet offensively and had just scored to make it a 28-14 game with 1:41 left before halftime. And you're starting to go, okay, well, maybe Baylor could get the ball back and they get the ball to start the second half and they could really make a game out of this. And instead, Xavier Thomas goes 95 yards for a touchdown on a kick return. And even though Damian Ramos misses the extra point, 34-14 feels a lot different at that point. And it just felt like at that point in the second half, like a tennis match, as long as LSU is holding serve and scoring a little bit on offense, they're not going to get caught in this game. And I do think some of Baylor's offensive numbers, Reed, may have come from that. LSU is playing pretty conservatively on defense, letting Baylor move the ball. making big plays on fourth down, as you mentioned, and just kind of limiting the explosives.
Yeah, Baylor didn't run the ball very well. You can tell that they didn't really have much success, and LSU did a good job defending the run. Xavier Thomas,
33 carries for 62 yards. That's 1.9 yards a pop. And yeah, that's kind of
really
affected by sacks, but not really.
Yeah. How much of that is the 35-yard loss?
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
So,
does that count as rushing, or is that just a fumble?
It does.
I think that's a team rush. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Anyway, I think Xavier Thomas, if you look big picture, Zach, Koki got into it, but he's a guy who you assume is going to be back next year, and he has that speed element that he flashed a few times this year. And the big picture speaking, it's not really in my opinion, it's not really what LSU did in this game. If you want to look at for optimism moving forward, it's what LSU did in the transfer portal, and it's what they're getting back. Garrett Nussmeier will be back next year. Harold Perkins will be back next year. Those are huge developments, and when you stack those returners on top of the talent they added in the transfer portal, you got the makings of a pretty talented team, one that can compete for a playoff spot. We'll see exactly how the roster shakes out with the transfers, and we'll see exactly how many positions they actually upgraded. But they've done so far about as good of a job as they could have done in the portal with the resources that they have and the needs that they have on the roster. And so when you're looking at next year, you're thinking about that Clemson game, and you're already starting to pencil in some starters. There's going to be a lot of transfers on that roster. There's going to be a lot of transfers on those starting lineups. So you need to look at that and just figure out if that gives you optimism or not.
By the way, my favorite stat of the day, and I know this is off topic, but I just had to bring it up. Jalen Milroe, the Alabama quarterback in their loss today, 16 carries for 7 yards with a long of 41. That's really, really hard. Now that's a little bit of a funny college stats things where sacks count as negative yards, but you won't see that one again. 16 carries for 7 yards with a long of 41.
Do you remember what he did to LSU in Baton Rouge this year?
Yeah,
very, very different.
He is that guy is Jekyll and Hyde, and he has been Jekyll against LSU most of the time. So that's kind of disappointing. But hey, if you're an LSU fan, you ring in the new year with an Alabama loss and an LSU win. I think you'll take it. Let's talk about Nussmeier a little bit, Reed, because you mentioned that he's coming back, and he's obviously the linchpin of this offense and of this roster for next year. You need him to play well. They mentioned on the ESPN broadcast, I don't know how many, a dozen times that Brian Kelly says he thinks he's building a championship roster. Well, this is a crucial year coming up for Brian Kelly. It's year 4. LSU's been perfectly fine the first 3 years. They've won 29 games now in 3 years. Perfectly fine. LSU fans, if you're watching, I know you could hit the like button for me if you agree with this. You want more than that. 29 wins in 3 years is perfectly fine, but you want more than that. Maybe not every single year. You don't have to win 12, 13, 14 games. But you want to see it at some point. Brian Kelly says he's building a championship roster. They said it over and over and over again. If it's going to be a championship roster, Nussmeier is going to be a big part of it. He was mostly very good today, 24 of 33, 304 yards, the 3 touchdowns. He had the ugly interception. He had a couple of other throws that were probably ill-advised as well. That's the kind of thing he's got to get out of his game. And maybe he just won't. Maybe he can just be explosive enough to make up for it. But it's still kind of a roller coaster with him.
What did he finish with? Was it 33 touchdowns and 12 interceptions? You want to see next year. You want to see those numbers go in opposite directions. You want to see the touchdowns go up. You want to see the interceptions go down. And if he cleans up the turnovers, cleans up the mistakes, then you've got the makings of a really good, really elite level quarterback who can get you in those playoff conversations, maybe get in the Heisman conversations, and really get into the first round of the NFL draft. I think him coming back, it gives him an opportunity to grow and develop as a passer. You see the tools that he has. You see the arm talent that he has. He made some incredible throws today, just like he has all season. He has NFL arm talent. Now he just needs NFL level decision making. It's easy to look back at Joe Burrow and Jaden Daniels and the leaps they made from year 1 to year 2 as an LSU starter and just assume that Nussmeier is going to take a similar leap. But that's not exactly fair to him to just expect him to throw for 4,000 yards again and compete for the Heisman. But improvement for him looks like fewer mistakes, fewer turnovers. He doesn't have to win the Heisman. He doesn't have to throw for 5,000 yards. He just needs to clean up those mistakes, and LSU could have a much more productive, efficient offense. Cookie.
Yeah, I thought the interception, obviously it's not great to throw interceptions, but I think that play kind of felt schemed up in a way where you can definitely see even a good quarterback making that mistake. Like the edge drops into coverage, right? And then they replace that edge with a rusher coming from the same side. So if you're not looking at that spot directly when that quick change is happening, you could easily just not see the guy. And he
don't try to get positive on us now. I mean, you're ruining.
I only say that to say that, like, I thought Nuss was pretty great in this game. Explosive throws. I think he was a lot more accurate deep down the field, which is a thing that we've been talking about a lot this season in terms of him trying to push the ball downfield and being more accurate on those deep throws, even though he almost certainly has the arm strength to do it. And I thought those bombs to Chris Hilton, those were excellent throws, excellent play. Even some of those plays to Aaron Anderson that he just dropped. And I don't know, like, really beside the turnover, I don't have a lot else to say about that. Not a ton else to criticize when it comes to Nussmeier's performance in this game. But he's going to be absolutely huge for this team next season. And I don't know if he has to necessarily be a Heisman candidate to warrant to get LSU to the playoff, but I think it's safe to say that they're going to need him to be somewhat close to that with less mistakes, obviously, in order for this team to become a playoff team, because quarterback's obviously the most important position. This is an offense that's very built off the quarterback and his ability to make plays and make reads. It's a progression-based system, right? This isn't Michigan's offense. This isn't the RPO stuff that Texas likes to do. Like, a lot of this is based on the quarterback and his ability to read the field and make progressions. And for a first-year quarterback, it was a very good season for Nussmeier. Yes, he made those mistakes, but again, this was his first year as a starter in college football, and I expect him to only grow from there. And I think this game left, honestly, nothing about this performance left me feeling that that isn't going to be the case. Some sort of growth is going to happen next season. So, yeah.
If he takes the step that you should expect a second-year starter to take. Again, we're not saying he's going to be Joe Burrow or Jaden Daniels. He's not automatically a Heisman contender, but he's going to be a very good quarterback and a good enough quarterback to compete for championships. If you also see, some of these transfers step in at the skill positions and on defense and provide a boost in those areas, I think LSU could get there. And by the way, I'm joking. Like, yes, the interception, I don't fully agree that a very good quarterback. I mean, there was kind of a couple of beats in between the switch you're talking about with the rusher and when Nussmeier threw that ball. You like to see him recognize that, but your point is well taken. And Nussmeier was excellent. Besides the two deep balls to Chris Hilton, specifically the first one, unbelievable throw. And you could kind of see it just a split second after Nuss saw it, and that ball's in the air, and you're going, that's a touchdown. You can do the Lane Kiffin and just start celebrating before it lands. So wanted to go through some other stats. I'm already hearing New Year's fireworks, so we don't want to stay on for too long. But Caden Durham, 13 carries, 60 yards. He's going to be your feature back next year. Josh Williams had a nice day, 9 carries, 42 yards, and a late touchdown. Chris Hilton had the 4 catches for 113. He had 1 touchdown, very easily could have been 2. Aaron Anderson, 8 catches, 91 yards. That could have been better, too. You guys mentioned a couple of drops he had back-to-back. Trades Green, 6 catches, 53 yards, 2 touchdowns. Xavier Thomas, 3 catches for 30 yards, and, of course, the kickoff return touchdown. So, all in all, very positive day for LSU. Before we go, I'll ask each of you guys for your final thoughts on this one and kind of summing up this 2024 season for the Tigers. Reed, you go first.
Yeah, Zach, real quick, let me interrupt you for a second here.
Sure.
Brian
Oh,
Kelly
you were
said,
typing something. I'm sorry.
yeah, I'm sorry. It's okay. Brian Kelly said Whitweek suffered a dislocated ankle and he'll have surgery soon. And he said he could be ready for spring practice. So all in all, I
Huh.
guess a relatively positive news update on him, as positive as it could be for what looked like a scary injury. So that's good to hear from Brian Kelly. I think just overall takeaways. LSU's offense was explosive tonight. We've been waiting for it to be consistently explosive. I don't know if I'd call it consistently explosive tonight, but what really stands out to me is the 8 passing plays of at least 15 yards. We knew Garrett Nussmeier had the arm talent and the arm strength to complete those kinds of passes on a regular basis, but I think at times he struggled to find receivers open downfield. He didn't really have anybody with the speed to beat defenses over the top, and he didn't really have enough time to develop chemistry with those receivers to complete deep passes. So I think that's something that LSU can carry over into next season, assuming it gets Chris Hilton back and he can stay healthy and have a decent sized role for the team next year. You want to see Nussmeier take that next step and get more comfortable attacking downfield and completing long passes like he did tonight.
Yeah, 100%. Koki, how about you?
Yeah. Reed kind of stole my thunder there with that.
He just makes such a salient point that it's hard to even add to it.
Yeah, exactly.
Koki copies my homework all the time, so this is nothing new.
He copies my
sure,
homework.
Koki.
What are you talking about? He copies my homework. Like
Children.
I sent in my score for the game. I think 31-28 Baylor over LSU, and then I look at the story later. Same exact score, same exact result, and I couldn't believe it. I'm like, how is this guy doing this?
Yeah, and Wilson went 30-27. Yeah,
Wilson was close too.
we were all wrong except for Rab. So anyway, Koki, 9-4 season ends on a positive note today. What are your final thoughts here as we turn the calendar?
Yeah, I think it's worth giving at least some sort of shout out to the offensive line, given how many younger pieces had to play in this game, more experienced pieces. And it wasn't a perfect performance for the line. And you could definitely tell at the beginning of the game, they were trying to protect it with a lot of short passes and some runs. But I thought they were solid in this game, and definitely those guys are more talented than the Baylor defenders that they were going up against, but they were a lot less experienced than those Baylor defenders. And those guys have struggled at points throughout the season, even the guys who have started like a DJ Chester or Paul Mubenga. But I thought they got better as the game went along today. And they gave Garrett Nussmeier plenty of time to make those deep throws that Reed was talking about. So it gives you a little bit, if LSU doesn't add another transfer offensive lineman, it gives you maybe a little bit more hope that they can go into next season with just the 2 guys. So we'll see how it all sort of shakes out next season. But with DJ Chester, with Cohen Eccles, with some of these other younger guys, Tyree Adams, a tackle, it was definitely a positive performance for all those guys.
Yep, 100%. And it's been a positive season for us, and we appreciate you guys all hanging out with us. The countdown is on. It's and I don't mean that it's like 5 hours and 15 minutes to the new year. I mean that it's like 242 days till LSU plays at Clemson on August the 30th. So that's LSU's next game. We're going to follow it all off season long and into the summer and into training camp and all of that stuff here on the LSU Sports Insider. So subscribe to the channel, hit the like button while you're down there, sign up for notifications, share the show with your friends, all of that good stuff. And of course, we'll have plenty of basketball coverage, gymnastics, and then into baseball and softball season as well in the spring. So we appreciate all of you hanging out with us. For Koki Riley and Reed Darcy, a couple of our crack LSU beat writers at The Advocate, I'm Zach Ewing. Thanks so much for watching, and have a happy new year.